Every Word is True by Adrian Aidan Smith. Bloody Captain Balo. Shadow and I had been ruined by Dewalt. He hadn't meant to ruin us, of course. He was never that clever. Stu Dunsmore Dewalt managed a number of trusts, including the ones Shadow and I were due to inherit when we came of age, but he did not have the head to properly manage them on his own. The man employed assistants and private secretaries and such. He looked with a kindly eye on eager young men like us, but he also turned a blind eye to the real trouble. One of his own trusted employees had managed to embezzle away what was meant to be ours. One night, after a lot of strong drink, Shadow said to me, "It's hardly fair, Irwin. Dewalt bungled it all, and it is you and I who shall suffer. He is in no danger of having to dig ditches for a living." "I quite agree," I replied, trying to whisper so as not to air our laundry for the entire club. "But apart from simply robbing the man blind, I can hardly see how we can get out of this situation. Neither of us is any good at gambling, and I'm not convinced that work isn't some disease." "He's fully blind, Irwin. He hadn't the sense to see he's employed a criminal. He will not see the danger from us either." We contrived to gain access to his safe and do our best to even the score. While we thought that we had made good of our escape and had covered our tracks well enough, we learned days later that we must have slipped up someplace. Word came that Dewalt was looking for us. In great haste and vexation, we made arrangements for a ship to take us to a continent where we might live in hiding for a time while the smoke cleared. Instead of venturing to a public seaport where we might be spotted, Shadow and I instead went down to a remote forest trail to a stretch of beach below the wooded hill. The plan was that a launch of a ship meet us there on the sand and take us away as quietly as possible. As we came down to the level of the beach, Shadow turned and spotted Stu Dewalt himself coming down the path. The ship and the launch had not yet arrived. We had to hide someplace on the beach. The cliffs that formed along the way vastly limited our options, but we were very lucky enough to discover a steep hill that broke through one cliffside, with the trees nearly reaching down to the sand and gravel. The angle was hardly favorable, and both of us were fairly loaded down, but we struggled upward like a pair of mountaineers, pitting all our strengths against the loose soil. Looking back between the hanging branches, I caught sight of Dewalt, looking around helplessly. It was just lucky that the beach did not show tracks very well. He showed no sign of leaving, though, so we had no choice but to continue on course and double back later. Our upward struggle was slow, although the cliff could not have been more than 40 or 50 feet in height. Amongst the rocks half buried in the hill were some squared-off stone blocks. I looked up and saw some kind of mound or deck had crumbled. I pulled on the sapling for support and made my way toward the confusion of blocks, for there was no other way up. "What can that be?" Shadow asked, a short ways below me. "I'm not sure, but we must go over to it." I was nearly past the broken mound of blocks when I stumbled and fell against it. A couple of bricks rolled free, and just managed to miss Shadow. I looked down as I tried to right myself and saw that the mound had not been for a deck or other building, but for a tomb. With renewed quickness, I shuffled up the hill to the top. "What can a coffin be doing in a thing like this, I wonder?" Shadow asked as he made the summit. "Perhaps we are on someone's estate. That's no proper way to maintain a tomb, though." As if in answer, a rumble came as the rest of the stone bricks gave way and tumbled down the hill. We backed away from the edge and saw between the trees was an old house, crumpled with age. The walk and drive all covered over with dead leaves and dirt. "Think that we could pass time here?" Shadow said. "The ship might be late at that." "Irwin! Chato!" Dewalt's voice called from somewhere in the woods. "He's up from the beach. He suspects," I say. "I have a funny feeling about this. Something isn't right," Chato said. We risked a glance over the edge of the rise and saw old portly Dewalt looking around and calling through the trees on the path below. Almost quicker than our eyes could track, a dark form emerged from the trees and jumped on Dewalt. Chato and I could only stand and watch as the hands tore into his throat. An awful choking sound came, and he fell dead on the ground. Back to the house we ran and began talking. Good Lord, what could that have been? Who would want to kill the old idiot? I asked. Chanto answered. Besides us, God knows. Perhaps we could call off the voyage and run back to town. For all we know, he told someone he suspected before coming here. If he's found, we shall be blamed. That house should provide a decent view of the harbor. Why don't we remain there for now? So we spent some desperate moments in the shade of the overhang on the front of the dilapidated building. To our great surprise, the door swung open and a singular, terrible figure emerged. The man could not have been a day under 90 years, so pitifully sagged and marked was his face. He wore pajamas that looked like he might have slept without change for weeks or more. He said to us, "What sound was that? What do you hear?" We explained briefly that we thought this place was abandoned and that we wished to remain for a time in order to avoid someone. "Aye, and I know the one ye mean to avoid. He'll have your blood as sure as I'm standing here. Now get on your way." He slammed the door in our faces. Dumbstruck, we got on our way. "You suppose he knows the killer then?" I asked. "I'm not going to ask him." Both agreeing that the path that wound toward DeWalt's resting place would not do, so we slid our way back down the cliff, past the shattered cairn. As we dropped down to the sand, we were horrified to see the coffin, empty and splintering out from the inside. "Ho there!" came a voice from up the beach. "Are you Irwin and Chateau?" Here, at last, was the launch, a sailor standing just on shore before it. We ran eagerly up to him. "Thank God," Chateau said. "We thought we should never have made it." "Are ye the men running from Balow's ghost?" What can you mean?" I asked. "Well, it might be my seafaring superstitions, but I saw a black figure atop the rocks just a few moments ago who vanished in a blink. He looked for all of the world like a fabled pirate of 100 years ago, bloody Captain Balow. There's a myth that he came to his end in these parts, but many whisper that the devil such as he could not lie still in the earth. The sentence ended in a choking sound, for a rusted green blade passed through the neck of the speaker. We recoiled in horror to see the walking corpse dressed in antique pirate's garb, the face a ruin of black melting flesh, eyeless sockets glaring hatefully. The remaining sailors pulled the launch away and were at sea without us. We rushed back to the foot of the trail. Chateau tripped on the root of the tree and fell in confusion of baggage. I looked back in time to see the dead hands close on his throat. In my horror, I took another fork in the trail and ran up steep switchbacks. I looked down and saw the devilish form of Balow following the route I'd taken. I loosed a great stone near the edge and rolled it down on him. The black pirate tumbled backward between trees and through shrubs and lay still in the sand. I thought perhaps I'd stopped him, but he rose as I switched and came again. As that dead thing started up the beach towards the trail, I remembered the words of the sailor. A devil such as he could not lie still on the earth. "Yes," I said, "the sea shall be his grave." Another larger stone loomed on the edge of the cliff near me, and I judged that it should reach my pursuer. I pushed against the stone with my full strength. Below, Balow came on. In a fury, I hurled myself against the stubborn boulder, causing it to shake, but it settled each time. I thought that I should collapse, but at last the rock budged and rolled downwards. I watched breathlessly as the rock rolled and bounced down the cliff's face, tore shrubbery asunder, and flew out across the open space, smashing into the black body. The stone's velocity was such that the pirate's living corpse was carried into the waves. I watched from my perch as the rotted limbs flailed and finally stopped. He had found his watery grave at last. I returned to town, prepared to own up for my crime, as I was the only one left to take credit. I went to the office of the late Mr. DeWalt, but before I could make my admission, his secretary said, "Hadn't he found you?" "Yes, it seems your trust has been recovered. In fact, the whole matter proved to be the most deduced accounting error. The man who absconded took no more than back pay." I never learned whether the bodies at the cove were found. I know only that some things dead do not remain so. I live and I have money, but I have lost my security about the life of a sleeping corpse.